Many people believe that Nazis are extreme right-wing, but what if I told you that this might not be true? Who are the left and right? Let's clearly define what left and right mean. Left wing, equality, collectivism, government control over society and the economy, opposition to private property, progressivism. Right wing, elitism, individualism, respect for institutions and authority, support for private property, tradition. There are also neutral factors: totalitarianism, militarism, chauvinism. These neutral traits can exist on both sides. Many think chauvinism is a right-wing idea, but actually, early socialists talked about it long before Hitler. Those socialists were Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Let's see what they wrote. Let us consider the actual worldly Jew. What is the worldly religion of the Jew? Huckstering. What is his worldly god? Money. Among all the large and small nations of Austria, only 3 standard bearers of progress took an active part in history and still retain their vitality: the Germans, the Poles, and the Magyars. Hence, they are now revolutionary. All the other large and small nationalities and peoples are destined to perish before long in the revolutionary world storm. For that reason, they are now counter-revolutionary. The Austrian Germans and Magyars will be set free and wreak a bloody revenge on the Slav barbarians. The general war which will then break out will smash this Slav Sonderbund and wipe out all these petty hidebound nations, down to their very names. The next world war will result in the disappearance from the face of the earth not only of reactionary classes and dynasties, but also of entire reactionary peoples, and that too is a step forward. The real point at issue always is Turkey in Europe, the Great Peninsula, Crimea, to the south of the Save and Danube. This splendid territory has the misfortune to be inhabited by a conglomerate of different races and nationalities, of which it is hard to say which is the least fit for progress and civilization. Slavonians, Greeks, Wallachians, Arnauts, 12 millions of men, are all held in submission by 1 million of Turks. We Marxists have always stood and still stand for a revolutionary war against counter-revolutionary nations. As we can see, Marx was an anti-Semite, a chauvinist, and a Slavophobe. Give them the Infinity Gauntlet, and they will wipe the counter-revolutionary peoples off the face of the earth. Hitler was not the only one to pursue discriminatory policies against certain ethnic and cultural groups: USSR, Russians, Cossacks, Koreans, Kalmyks, Crimean Tatars, Gypsies and Ingushs, Chechens, Reich, Jews, Gypsies, Slavs, PRC, small peoples of China, Cambodia, a quarter of the Khmer population. So if we consider racism and chauvinism to be right-wing markers, then Marx, Engels, and Lenin, the USSR, the PRC, and Cambodia were ultra-right-wing according to this logic. Now let's move on to the NSDAP manifesto. The word workers is included in the name itself, emphasizing its leftist orientation. Let's look at the manifesto and see how many points we can call socialist. We demand that the state first and foremost commit itself to providing employment and ensuring the livelihood of German citizens. All citizens of the state must have equal rights and obligations. We demand the elimination of unearned and easy income, as well as the abolition of interest slavery. We demand the nationalization of all joint stock companies. We demand the participation of workers and employees in the distribution of profits of large commercial enterprises. We demand the creation of a healthy middle class, as the immediate seizure of large stores from private ownership and their leasing at low prices to small producers. We demand the introduction of the death penalty for criminals who have committed crimes against the German people, usurers, speculators. We demand the replacement of Roman law, which serves the interests of the materialistic world order, with German folklore. Here you have equality, workers, the middle class, the struggle against capital, and the exaltation of labor. Hitler, in particular, in one of his speeches recorded in the film Triumph of the Will, stated that his party sought to destroy all classes within German society. These are not just random phrases. This is a consistent socialist and anti-capitalist program. Any communist would say that this was merely populism aimed at winning the trust of the masses. That's not true either. In reality, these points were more than fulfilled. The Third Reich was a model of state control. The enterprises were run by party officials. A Reich commissioner for pricing was appointed, overseeing price setting, monitoring, and the enforcement of all pricing regulations. In November 1936, a decree banned any further price increases from that point. All prices were fixed. In the summer of 1938, Goering remarked, "Gentlemen, not for a second, and I mean a second, would I hesitate, as I proved with regard to another matter, to intervene at once to confiscate the whole business. If I should come to the conclusion that he does not understand, that he can see the world only from the toilet seat perspective of his own enterprise, and cannot look further, that fellow must go. By a stroke of my pen he would lose his business and his property. Accordingly, private property was formally preserved, but the business owner wasn't really in charge. Instead, they were a manager, subordinated to the will of the state and the Führer. Enterprises were grouped into syndicates, essentially coordinating prices among themselves. They fulfilled state contracts and operated under strict government oversight. Those who resisted faced conversations in the basement, and if that failed, their businesses were simply seized. At the same time, Hitler declared that private property would remain, but that all control over it, including demand, production, means of production, and prices, would remain with the state. In essence, private property belonged to the state. It existed on paper, but in reality it did not exist. The most telling example of this whole socialist mess was the Hugo Junkers case. For those who don't know, this man is the inventor of the world's first all-metal airplane. Immediately after the Nazis came to power, the socialist government decided, for the good of the people, to lower airfares for ordinary German workers. But the damned money-hungry capitalist Hugo Junkers, who owned the airlines, refused to improve the quality of life of ordinary Germans by prohibiting price reductions. Then the National Socialist government had no choice but to have a polite chat with Hugo in the Gestapo basements, after which Hugo voluntarily gave up everything necessary for the good of the German people and even went into voluntary house arrest. The official version was that Junkers voluntarily left his businesses to devote himself to scientific research. By 1943, everything related to the military sphere had been nationalized, and by 1944, even restaurants had been nationalized. Hitler's Germany was not a capitalist country. It was a statist, corporatist economy where the interests of the individual and the market were completely subordinated to the collectivist goal of the Aryan race. Some may say that Hitler eliminated trade unions and that he was radically right-wing. They forget that Stalin did the same thing. Hitler, like Stalin, merged independent trade unions into a single state union. The German Labor Front, DAFT, implemented numerous programs aimed at improving working conditions and leisure time for workers. Salaries and vacation time were increased. Social courts of honor were even introduced, where they made sure that, God forbid, a boss did not yell at a simple worker. One of DAFT's subsidiaries was Beauty of Labor. Its main function was to improve workplaces. Entire companies were set up to combat noise in factories and improve ventilation. On a massive scale, enterprises were greened. Workshops were equipped with large windows that let in more light. Showers and canteens were set up for workers, and sports grounds were built. Another organization created within the framework of DAFT was Strength Through Joy. It opened libraries, canteens, swimming pools, and training programs. Thus, sports and active recreation, previously considered the preserve of the bourgeoisie, became accessible to workers. For example, this applies to sailing and downhill skiing. Prices for vacationers were kept affordable thanks to numerous special discounts. For example, a vacationer traveling in a third-class train car could buy a ticket at a 50-75% discount. A similar pricing policy applied to hotels and meals. The average worker's salary was 170 marks. For 55 marks, you could take a 5-day cruise to Norway, and for an even more modest sum, a 1-day trip to the island of Heligoland. Educational excursions were organized to Venice, Naples, and Athens. Another socially oriented organization was the NSV, which organized payments to poor families. School education was free. Free kindergartens were opened, healthcare was nationalized, and Jewish property was redistributed for the benefit of the German people. The state did not allow prices to rise. Unemployment fell from 30% to 0%, and labor was ideologically exalted. As we can see, the Nazi Party fully justified its socialist prefix. Incidentally, so did the background color of the flag. Heraldically, red is revolutionary, leftist, and communist. The color of the flag is certainly good, but we have forgotten one of the most important parameters: tradition. The Nazi worldview was anti-elitist from the outset. Hitler and his entourage despised the old Prussian aristocracy, considering it detached from the people, defeatist due to Germany's defeat in World War I, and most importantly, alien to the spirit of the new Germany. The Nazis abolished all titles and class privileges. Within the party, aristocratic surnames were perceived as potentially disloyal and monarchist. According to Goebbels' recollections, Hitler said, "The old nobility is rotten. The new type of rulers are our party members who have grown out of the people." At the same time, Hitler pragmatically used loyal aristocrats if they were useful to him, such as military officers or diplomats. After the July 20th, 1944 conspiracy, a failed assassination attempt on Hitler, most of the conspirators from the nobility were arrested and executed. This led to a final break between the Nazi regime and the old aristocracy. Since then, the participation of the nobility in government has virtually ceased. As for the monarchy, Hitler did not like Kaiser Wilhelm II, calling him an old fool. His very figure symbolized the shameful defeat of 1918. Hitler never met with him about the restoration of the monarchy, and after Wilhelm's death in 1941, he banned state mourning mourning ceremonies, ordering that they be limited to a short announcement in the press. As depicted in The Triumph of the Will, Hitler gave a speech to the Hitler Youth at Nuremberg and said, "We want to be a united nation, and you, my youth, are to become this nation. In the future, we do not wish to see classes and castes, and you must not allow them to develop among you. One day we want to see one nation." The Nazis were building a Volksgemeinschaft, a folk society, which does not fit the criteria of a traditional right-wing order, whether monarchical or aristocratic. What do you think Hitler thought about Jesus Christ and about the Jewish apostles? Here is what Hitler said about the Old Testament, Hitler's table talk. "The Old Testament is nothing but a collection of incredible cruelties and absurdities. It's the Jewish Bible of hatred and revenge, the Bible of Satan." By the spring of 1937, Hitler had fallen out with the Vatican and promised to take revenge on the church. Thousands of priests, monks, and laymen were arrested, often on trumped-up charges of immorality and smuggling foreign currency. The NSDAP began to disband Catholic youth societies and incorporate them into the Hitler Youth. Dozens of Catholic publications were banned. Even the secrecy of confession was violated. Catholic diocese magazines were banned, and the amount of paper available for church needs was sharply reduced. Hitler had his own vision of Christianity. He proposed removing Christian slave morality and reworking Jesus into a fighter against the Jews. Hitler was not against Jesus. He believed that all the problems lay with the Apostle Paul, who had distorted Christ's teachings. Therefore, an analog was devised, Aryan Christianity, according to which Christianity needed to be cleansed of its Jewish heritage and transformed into an exclusive racial religion. This included occult elements, Hyperborea, Aryans from Tibet, runic magic, the new religion of Germany. One of the main storytellers was Alfred Rosenberg. Even Hitler laughed at his stories. However, this did not prevent him from becoming the head of the German church in 1934 with his National Church program of the Reich, but it did not take root, and Rosenberg became an outcast. As we can see, Hitler's religion is not traditional, which means it has nothing to do with right-wing discourse. Tradition is created over centuries, not in an SS office in a week. About statehood. Few people know this, but the Nazis planned for the state to wither away once they had achieved all their goals, as it would then become unnecessary. Surprisingly, Marx spoke about the withering away of the state in exactly the same way, although he had different goals. Anarchism is a left-wing political ideology. Socialists love to pretend that Nazis were not socialists. At that time, socialist ideas were mainstream, as if that is not the case now. Hitler and Mussolini were socialists at the beginning of their careers. The former was a member of the DAP, the latter of the PSI. Goebbels was a communist. It is obvious that they learned a lot from Marx. In essence, both Nazism and fascism stem from socialism. We might have called ourselves the Liberal Party. We chose to call ourselves the National Socialists. We are not internationalists. Our socialism is national. To us, state and race are one. Fascism recognizes the genuine demands which gave rise to socialism and trade unionism, and gives them due weight within the corporative system of the state. Socialism is the science of dealing with the common weal. Communism is not socialism. Marxism is not socialism. The Marxians have stolen the term and confused its meaning. I shall take socialism away from the socialists. Summing up, let's return to our table. As we can see, all the criteria on the left match. I forgot to add Göring's 4-year plans to collectivism, which are surprisingly similar to the Soviet 5-year plans. Now we can say for sure that the Nazis were leftists and had nothing to do with the right. Finally, everything is fine now. There is no place here for dull horseshoe theory. All time codes are left under the video. Please subscribe and like. Share this video with a communist friend. Subscribe to my Patreon. This video is unlikely to be monetized. Best wishes. See you next time.